The envelope was heavy, its paper textured and cream-colored, embossed with golden lettering that caught the afternoon light streaming through my Boston window. I held it delicately, as though the weight of the future rested inside. After all, this was the moment I had been waiting for my son Julian's wedding invitation. I slid the card out and unfolded it, admiring the calligraphy. Julian Whitmore and Delphine Moreau request the honor of your presence. The words looked regal, dignified. Everything a Parisian wedding should be. My heart swelled with a strange mix of pride and nostalgia. I thought of Henry, my late husband, and how he would have smiled seeing Julian's name etched so elegantly alongside his bride's. Inside was an enclosure listing the honored guests. My eyes traced the names, searching for mine. Guest of honor, the Marat family. Distinguished guests, Monsieur and Madame so-and-so. I scanned again. Slower this time, the way you might reread a contract when something feels off. My name was not there. At first, I laughed softly, brushing it off as a misprint. Perhaps it was an oversight, a careless slip from the Parisian printer. But the longer I stared, the more the laughter died in my throat. They had listed even distant cousins from Delphine's side. Yet there was no mention of me, the woman who had signed the checks, the one who had wired the deposits, the one who had promised $150,000 so her son could have a fairy tale wedding. I set the card gently on the table, afraid that my hands would betray the tremor building inside. Surely Julian hadn't noticed. Surely Delphine would correct it. Surely there would be another letter, an apology, a corrected proof. Still, an unease settled in me, creeping like a shadow across a bright day. I tried to reassure myself. Don't be dramatic. Eleanor, it's a simple mistake. They'll laugh about it later. Toast you in Paris. Thank you for making their dream possible. And yet, deep down, another voice whispered something colder. For $150,000. I thought I was buying my seat at the table. Turns out, I wasn't even on the list. The card still lay open when my computer chimed with a new email notification. Delphine's name glowing in bold letters across the screen. The email arrived on a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky felt heavy and the air pressed against the windows. I opened my inbox with the usual routine bills, newsletters I kept forgetting to unsubscribe from, a note from my book club. Then I saw her name, Delphine Moreau. No subject line. Just her name. I clicked it open, expecting some logistical update about florists or travel plans. Instead, I found words so sharp they seemed to cut straight through me. Your presence will embarrass my family. You don't speak French. We've arranged a live stream so you can watch. I read it once, twice, a third time, as though repetition might soften it, but the words didn't blur. They only sharpened. My own daughter-in-law had just uninvited me from my son's wedding, not with a phone call, not with even a shred of courtesy, but with a few typed lines delivered across the Atlantic. The next sentence was the one that burned. The financial arrangements remain the same. Obviously. Obviously. That word sat like a stone in my chest. I was not welcome as a mother, but I was expected to remain a benefactor. They wanted my money, not my presence. My role was to wire funds, not to walk my son down the aisle of a French chateau. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen, the cursor blinking in rhythm with my heartbeat. All those years of raising Julian after Henry passed, the sacrifices, the dreams, the relentless devotion reduced to a live stream link and an invoice. I was being told, in no uncertain terms, that my love was embarrassing, but my money was indispensable. The computer chimed again. Another email arriving. My eyes stayed fixed on Delphine's words. my hand hovering over the mouse but unable to click away, when Henry died. The world collapsed in a single afternoon. One moment he was beside me at the kitchen table, teasing me about overcooking the roast, and the next, he was gone, struck down by a sudden stroke before the ambulance could even arrive. Julian was only 12. I remember holding his hand at the funeral, promising him with every ounce of my being that I would not let the loss of his father steal his future too. That promise became my compass. I buried my grief in work, taking on heavier course loads at Boston University, grading papers long into the night, and tutoring freshmen on weekends just to stretch the paycheck. Every extra shift meant a little more security for Julian. I sold Henry's vintage Mustang, the car he had polished every Saturday, with a pride that bordered on reverence to cover Julian's private school tuition. I cried when I handed over the keys, but I told myself education mattered more than sentiment. Vacations disappeared. Dinners out became luxuries. And every dollar went into shaping a path that would keep Julian's world intact. I wanted him to have choices, opportunities, and a sense of possibility that I had never been afforded. Watching him excel in languages, hearing him chatter in French with ease, I believed every sacrifice had been worth it. But as I sat staring at Delphine's email, her words echoing in my mind, a thought crept in that I had spent years suppressing. I thought love meant giving without question. Maybe it meant I never taught him how to respect the giver. The sacrifices I made had built him wings, but they had also taught him to expect the wind beneath them without ever asking who provided it. I shut my laptop gently, the click sounding final in the quiet of my kitchen, just as the memory of Delphine's laughter drifted back into focus. Julian had invited me to his condo in Back Bay one evening to go over the final travel details. I wanted to believe it was his way of keeping me involved, though the shadow of Delphine's email still lingered in my chest. When I arrived, the apartment was buzzing with calls, papers scattered across the dining table, and half-packed suitcases on the floor. Delphine slipped into the bedroom, phone pressed to her ear. Speaking rapidly in French, I busied myself stacking the envelopes Julian had left out, trying to tune out the lilting cadence of her voice, but then I caught it. The words were unmistakable. La vieille banque, the old bank. She laughed after saying it, a laugh I'd heard at dinner parties, airy and sweet, now sharpened into something cruel. My French was far from fluent, but I knew enough to feel the cut in my bones. She wasn't speaking about me as a mother, or even as an in-law. I was a bank, a relic, a source of money without worth beyond the checks I signed. I froze, hands resting on the envelopes. The room suddenly smaller, air heavier. Julian was in the kitchen, oblivious, humming as he poured wine into glasses. For a moment, I considered storming into that room, demanding she repeat herself in English. But something inside me shifted. Instead, something colder, quieter. The email had humiliated me, but hearing her voice say it out loud, hearing the scorn drip from her words, confirmed what I had tried so hard not to believe. I was not family. I was capital. I smiled faintly when Julian handed me a glass of wine, careful not to let my trembling show. He spoke of Paris, of the chateau, of the grand future ahead, while the phrase La vieille banque replayed in my mind like a refrain. I nodded at the right moments, but I was elsewhere, standing at the edge of a decision I had never imagined making. That night, as I walked back to my car beneath the Boston streetlights, the laughter still clung to me. Each step steadied me, each breath colder than the last, until by the time I turned the key in the ignition, my course was set. The marble lobby of the bank felt colder than usual that morning, though perhaps it was only the resolve running through me. I walked past the polished brass fixtures, my heels echoing on the floor. carrying me toward the office of Mr. Llewellyn, who had handled my accounts for more than a decade. He rose when I entered, a kind smile crossing his face, but it faltered slightly when he saw the folder in my hands. "Mrs. Whitmore, what can I do for you today?" I sat across from him, placing the documents on his desk with deliberate care. "I'd like to revoke the remaining guarantee for the Paris wedding, $70,000. Effective immediately." He blinked, clearly startled. "You mean the letter of credit for the chateau and vendors, Mrs. Whitmore? That's quite a sum. Are you sure? I've never been more certain." He hesitated, searching my face for hesitation that wasn't there. "The deposits already sent 80,000. Those will remain with the vendors. But without this guarantee, contracts will be voided. There will be consequences." "I understand," I said, steady and calm. "Please prepare the paperwork." For a long moment, he studied me as though weighing whether I grasped the magnitude of what I was doing. But finally, he drew the forms from his drawer, sliding them across the desk. My hand didn't tremble as I signed each page. Each signature felt like a door closing, a chapter ending. When the final form was complete, he gathered the papers and gave a quiet nod. "It's done. The vendors will be notified within the day." I rose, smoothing my coat, and for the first time in years, I felt Henry's voice clear in my mind. Enough is enough. Outside, the city moved with its usual rhythm, taxis rushing past, students hurrying across the square, the smell of roasted chestnuts from a vendor's cart. Yet for me, the air carried a sharper clarity. I walked back into the Boston streets lighter, braced for the storm that would soon follow. The first call came just after dawn, my phone vibrating angrily on the nightstand. I silenced it, assuming it was a wrong number, but then it buzzed again and again. By the time I made it to the kitchen and set the kettle on the stove, there were 12 missed calls. Julian, Delphine, numbers with French country codes. I poured hot water over the tea leaves and carried the cup to the window, settling into my chair overlooking Boston Harbor. The gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp against the stillness, while the phone lit up beside me with another burst of buzzing. 13, 14, 15. By the time the steam rose from my teacup, I had counted 23 missed calls. I didn't need to answer to know what they wanted. Somewhere in Paris, the chateau's manager was demanding the final installment. The caterer was threatening to cancel. The florist was clutching contracts now rendered worthless. The fairy tale was unraveling thread by thread. I lifted the cup to my lips, savoring the quiet strength in the choice I had made. Each unanswered call was not avoidance, but assertion. I was no longer the old bank, no longer the woman whose value was measured in wire transfers and guarantees. For the first time in years, silence felt like power. The phone buzzed again, vibrating across the table until it nearly tipped over the edge. I placed my hand on it gently, holding it still, and let it ring out. I had spent decades rushing to answer every demand, every plea, every need. Today, I allowed the world to wait. When it finally stilled, I knew the next voice I heard would not be Delphine's. It would be Julian's. It was late afternoon when I finally picked up. Julian's voice burst through the line before I could even say hello. "Mom, you've ruined everything. Do you hate me that much?" His words cracked with fury, as though I were the enemy, not the mother who had held his world together since he was 12. I closed my eyes, steadying my breath. "Julian, listen." "No, you listen," he snapped. "The chateau is threatening to cancel. The caterer wants double to rebook. Delphine is in tears. How could you do this to us? To me?" His anger poured through the phone, hot and relentless. And then came the dagger. "This is jealousy. Isn't it? You could never accept Delphine. You wanted me to stay tied to you, not build a life of my own." The room blurred for a moment as his words landed. I had braced myself for Delphine's disdain, but not for this my own son, painting me as petty, jealous, small. It broke something in me, not loudly, but quietly, like porcelain fracturing under pressure. When I spoke, my voice was calm, almost too calm. "Julian, I didn't ruin your wedding. I simply stopped paying for my own exclusion." There was silence then, the kind that says more than shouting ever could. I could almost hear him struggling to reconcile the mother who raised him with the woman who had finally said no. Delphine was right, he muttered at last, his voice low and bitter. "You've embarrassed us all." The line went dead, leaving only the sound of my own breath in the stillness. I set the phone down, my heart heavier than before, knowing the next blow would come not from him, but from the collapse of the wedding itself. It didn't take long. By the end of the week, the cracks had widened into a collapse no one could stop. The chateau sent formal notice that the reservation was void. The caterer, insulted by the broken guarantee, refused to rebook even at double the price. The florist, the photographer, the string quartet all followed in succession, the elegant French dream unraveled with the swiftness of a pulled thread. The Moreau family wasted no time placing blame. In a single curt message, they branded the Whitmores unreliable and unsuitable for alliance. Their pride could not withstand the humiliation of a canceled wedding. Delphine's voice never reached me directly, but through Julian's messages, I could hear her fury. She accused him of weakness, of failing to secure what she considered her due. 2 days later, she ended the engagement, returning the ring not in person but by courier. Back in Boston, word traveled faster than I expected. Relatives whispered of the Paris wedding that never was. Cousins called, not to scold, but to express disbelief that Julian had allowed such arrogance to drive a wedge between us. My sister said softly, "You did what needed to be done," though I could hear the ache in her voice for the boy she once knew. Through it all, I tended my garden. The roses were just beginning to open, fragile buds unfolding into color. I knelt among them, hands in the soil, the air heavy with the scent of earth and new life. As I clipped a fading bloom, I whispered to myself, they called me unsophisticated, yet I'm the only one who acted with grace. I stood slowly, wiping dirt from my palms, and looked toward the house where my phone sat waiting. I knew Julian would come, not with anger this time, but with the hollow voice of a man left alone. Julian showed up on my porch one evening, shoulders slumped, eyes shadowed with sleeplessness. He didn't look like the confident man who had once spoken about his Parisian future. He looked like the boy I used to wake from nightmares after his father died, lost and afraid. "Mom," he said, voice cracking. "She's gone." Delphine ended it. I don't know what to do. I let him inside, brewed coffee, and waited. He paced the kitchen, recounting how the Moreaus had humiliated him, how Delphine had turned cold the moment the money vanished. He spoke as though it were all a sudden storm he hadn't seen coming. I listened quietly until his words thinned into silence. Finally, he looked at me, desperation etched in every line of his face. "Can you forgive me? I was wrong. I said things I didn't mean. Please, Mom." I reached across the table, my hand steady. "Julian, I will always love you. That hasn't changed. But love without respect is no love at all. Respect is the only currency I accept now." He swallowed hard, shame flickering in his eyes. "I thought the money would always be there. I thought you'd never say no." "That's the problem," I said softly. "You believed my sacrifices were debts I owed you. They weren't. They were gifts. And gifts can't be demanded, only cherished." The silence stretched between us. Not hostile, but heavy with truth. For the first time, I saw him begin to understand, not fully, not yet, but the first fragile thread of realization. He lowered his gaze. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I want to earn it. I nodded, feeling the faintest glimmer of hope. Somewhere beyond humiliation and loss, my son might still find his way back. And I would be here, waiting, but never again at the cost of my dignity. In the weeks that followed, the calls slowed, the whispers faded, and the world moved on. My house grew quiet again, save for Julian's tentative visits where he tried, piece by piece, to rebuild the bridge he had helped burn. I didn't rush him, and I didn't rush myself. Some wounds need time, and some lessons need silence before they take root. One morning, as I balanced my checkbook at the kitchen table, the stark figure stared back at me. $70,000 money, once promised to chandeliers and champagne, still sat untouched. I could have let it rest. A bitter reminder of betrayal. But bitterness never grew anything worth keeping. Instead, I called Boston University, the place where I had spent decades teaching, grading, and guiding others. I spoke to the Dean of Languages, explaining I wanted to endow a small scholarship fund. For women over 40, I said, returning to school to study languages. There was a pause on the other end before she answered, her voice warm. Mrs. Whitmore, that's extraordinary. Do you realize how many women set aside their education to raise families, only to believe it's too late for them? I smiled. Yes, I knew. And I knew, too. The sting of being told I was lesser because I couldn't conjugate verbs in French. The irony was not lost on me. I had been shamed for my silence, yet now I would help others find their voices in new languages. The paperwork took weeks, but when it was done, I felt lighter. A future spring. Some woman sitting in a classroom might remember my name, not as the old bank, but as the hand that opened a door. As I walked through my garden, the roses were in full bloom, red petals catching the light. I touched one gently and whispered, Henry, we didn't destroy a wedding. We saved our dignity, and perhaps we built something better. The wind shifted through the leaves, carrying with it a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. I stood among the roses, knowing the legacy I'd chosen was one no one could take away.